Hoist Technologies has a wealth of experience and knowledge in the field of cybersecurity. Let's get to know the company better, learn about its new products and future plans.
Hoist Technologies has been a company for over 20 years. The company creates products and services providing in the field of cybersecurity. We have been public since 2021 and have been under sanctions since 2021. In our product portfolio, over 20 items are always evolving. I started in February 2017, about 7.5 years ago.
Over the last 2 years, at industry events, Positive Technologies, we have often heard from the company about plans to develop its product line. One of the important new products that has been announced is the Positive Technologies NGFW, a next-generation firewall, which we will discuss in detail today. I would like to start our conversation with your explanation of what a next-generation firewall is, how it differs from traditional firewalls, and what tasks it performs.
Yes, in fact, the class of products known as next-generation firewall was established in 2012, if I remember correctly, so it's not a super new class of products. The point is this: traditional firewalls are capable of filtering at the level of entities such as IP addresses and ports are technical aspects that were relevant in the early 90s. Then, with the development of the internet, it turned out that almost all applications, websites, and so on operate through the same port, while IP addresses change depending on who is connected to which socket and how the network is configured. So, in general, in any reasonably complex corporate network, using a traditional firewall is practically impossible. It's not feasible to allow or deny access to someone. Because if you block port 443, which is used for everything, you essentially cut off their internet access. To manage access in a granular way, meaning to block one application while allowing another, you need a more intelligent piece of hardware that can understand what is actually happening within these protocols. The next-generation firewall product class was specifically designed for this purpose, to dive deeper into the traffic and understand how one application differs from another. Usually, when I'm asked to give an example of what an NGF actually does, I say, for instance, if there are girls in HR who want to visit a dating site during the day, the NGF can manage that. In other words, you could say it understands who the girls in HR are because it knows which employees are in the company. It integrates with authentication systems. On the other hand, it understands what a dating site is because it's a class of applications that can be both a website and a mobile app, and so on. Or, I don't know, an admin might be monitoring adult sites, for instance. So, you see, these are the kinds of things he can do, and alongside this, an additional functionality that has emerged specifically in next-generation firewalls is security functionality. So, besides being able to restrict access, he also detects attacks, patterns, identifies them in the traffic, and so on, and can actively block them. Well, that's his job. On top of that, since we are a company with over 20 products in the field of cybersecurity, we usually base our attack response on products from the engineering firewall class. So, if other products detect an intruder in the network, the firewall is used to block them, ensuring they are stopped while the rest of the network continues to operate. And that's exactly why we started developing it, because we can't do what we do without having a good product that we can rely on in our ecosystem.
I envision the next-generation firewall solution as a kind of hardware-software complex that is delivered to the end client. Could you explain how you address the hardware issue? Do you produce it yourself, or do you source it from third-party manufacturers? And what overall function does the hardware perform in this product?
In fact, this is a question for us with an asterisk, because Positive Technologies has historically been a software manufacturer. So, for us, hardware is quite a new area. On top of that, in the current situation, I'll let you in on a secret: very few people in Russia actually make hardware. So, that's the gist of it. Still, there are some design solutions from China that are purchased as blueprints, and they are somewhat localized to varying degrees, meaning some do a larger part here, while others do less. But the most challenging aspect of this entire system is indeed the logistics of these components, assembly, obtaining all the correct paperwork, and so on. This area requires years of experience. Actually, this path is challenging but working. We are getting into all the necessary registers, and we are creating our hardware. The networks are quite high performance, with a great speed, and doing this without being sure that the hardware will be fully dedicated to this firewall means, essentially, depriving oneself of the internet at certain times. So, if the load suddenly increases or there's a lot of traffic, any lost packet is someone's internet session. The requirements are, firstly, very high performance, but the networks are fast. And secondly, there's also resilience. Any problem is immediately visible to everyone. A good next-generation firewall is something that clients are unaware of. Simply, those who are sitting and working on their computers don't notice its presence. That's the ideal. When you know about it, that already indicates that something is going wrong, because, in reality, you only become aware of it if you've gone to some forbidden site or something like that. At that moment, it's there. And so, to ensure resilience and performance, this is usually done in the form of hardware, because it can be guaranteed that no resources will be compromised. If any other tasks are used, it will definitely handle this performance and maintain resilience at the required level. At the same time, we made a bet, historically since 2012. In 2012, computer technologies were such that to process network speeds, it was necessary to develop specialized hardware. That is, to create special processors that handle only network traffic, specifically designed for that purpose, and so on. And for this very reason, only a few companies around the world have made these products very well. Because, on one hand, it's complicated, and on the other hand, to make the economy work, you need very large volumes of supply worldwide. And that's exactly why there are no good local products in Russia. Well, because these are very high costs for such a small market like Russia, which is about 2% of the international market, conditionally. But technologies are evolving, and in principle, modern processors, the same ordinary Intel and AMD ones sold in regular shops, have also made a significant leap forward. At the moment we revisited this task, it turned out that on ordinary computers, with regular processors, it is possible to do the same things that were not possible in 2012. And we placed our bet on what you might call commodity hardware, that is, hardware that can be bought anywhere in order to not to reinvent the wheel, especially now in modern realities, it's just impossible. That is, if we wanted to create a specialized processor, it would take years, because we would need to come up with the design and order it from somewhere. China isn't very accommodating and doesn't produce such products on a large scale. I know that many companies that place orders face a huge number of problems. So, we chose the most standard server that can be bought anywhere. And we realized that this path would be the most correct. And already, to make this server specifically Russian, that is, to localize production, we bring these components here, and some we produce to the extent that it makes our production Russian. That is, the actual circuitry is ours, and the component base is, roughly speaking, brought in from wherever we could order it to come to us. At the same time, our product line consists of small boxes, like these little ones, which can be placed on a table or hung somewhere in a corner, I don't know, in a petrol station or a shop. And it is primarily aimed at such small offices, that is, as I mentioned, petrol stations, shops, and such things. It processes a bit of traffic but is compact, fanless, quiet, and so on. And this thing is completely designed by us. Made in Russian factories, it is fully ours. There are also larger, high-performance standard servers that are also localized in Russia, but that's a completely different line. They are all mounted as full-fledged equipment, just like any other. So, these are servers of Russian production. But despite all this, we strongly believe that those who don't need a lot of traffic will still opt for virtual machines, because it's also possible to provide quite high speeds on them. And this is much easier from a logistics standpoint, because our sales have taken off and the complexity is significant. It's the logistics of transporting hardware, moving hardware, assembling it, and testing everything. This takes a lot of time. Software, of course, has a much quicker time to market and is much more convenient to use.
And virtual machines mean that processing is done on servers that are with you, but not on the client.
No, it is processed on the client. It's just that the client can also run other software on those same virtual machines. So they have a bunch of boxes, and they have these, zoned, roughly speaking, machines on which you can install, among other things, generation firewall. Well, if we're talking about some super high load, it might lose something at peak times, so when we write specifications, we say, up to a certain traffic level, it will work like this. But, at this level, we guarantee it.
Can you explain why everyone is talking about Russian NGFWs now, even though Russian vendors didn't develop this product before?
Actually, it's quite simple. When what happened in 2022 occurred, and most Western vendors left Russia, practically all of them then, in various niches. Different situations arose. In some niches, there are no problems as there are many Russian products, while in others, the issues are quite evident. And next-generation firewall is one of those areas where problems are present. In other words, there were no real Russian products. And why weren't there any? Because, so to speak, these are very large investments, and it was very difficult to recoup them on the scale of the Russian market. In other words, to create a product comparable in quality to Western ones using 2012 technology, one would have to engage in the production of their own hardware, and this wasn't done in Russia. So, they made very niche products, which, I don't know, were for super small traffic but were super trusted, for example, certified across all possible classes. And if there was any traffic going through a certain place, you couldn't do anything with it. Russian products were not adapted for anything else. Those were the products that existed in Russia. So when someone in Russia says they've been working on this for 10 years, it's usually in this format. They made something a long time ago to solve a narrow task. But in the form that Western solutions are used, such products simply didn't exist in Russia. So why is everyone talking about it now? Because when they looked at the technology map, it was the most painful topic. Besides that, you essentially can't deploy a product in development. In many areas, they went down the path of saying, let's deploy it and then refine it, and so on. But if a product is sitting off to the side trying to catch attacks, that's still acceptable because it doesn't interfere with the main operations. But specifically for a next-generation firewall, it's essentially a firewall for internet traffic. If it doesn't work well, it stops business. And that's why it's impossible to deploy an unfinished or poor-quality product for such use. Precisely for this reason, when everyone realized the problem, they started asking, what are we going to do? Because it was unclear at the same time, many still held out hope that perhaps Chinese vendors would start bringing us something. But all the Chinese vendors that have produced any somewhat functional products are wary of secondary sanctions because they are trying to compete with Western vendors in the same markets for a 2% share. They clearly didn't dare to supply this here on a large scale. So we were left alone with what we had. Consequently, everyone is heroically trying to solve the problem that has arisen.
Can you assess what NGFW solutions are mainly being used by Russian companies now?
We even conducted surveys, and we constantly research this issue and so on. And amusingly, about 30% honestly said that they continue to pirate Western products. In other words, it's obviously a risky scheme, but they are so unsure about what to do in the current situation that they feel trapped and say, well, that's just how it is. Accordingly, these are the ones who admit it. As a rule, we know that when a topic isn't particularly popular, about half will speak honestly, while the other half won't. In other words, in our humble estimation, about 70% of the market continues to use what they had before. Simply extending it and making it work through various roundabout ways. There are segments of the market where the traffic isn't very high, for instance, some small government organizations or something related, and, in principle, the solutions available in the Russian market suit them. They generally suited them before, that is, in places with low traffic where complete confidentiality is required, and they are, in one way or another, using Russian products, including those from other vendors, and they also look at us. Then there's, roughly speaking, the Israeli company Checkpoint, it. Continue to operate in Russia, and each time there are various rumors, like Israel will prohibit them from selling in Russia, or they will leave themselves, now they are staying, or they will work in Belarus, or something else. But if they still exist and somehow sell and extend solutions, a certain part of the market relies on them. However, from our conversations with clients, as soon as a worthy alternative arises, everyone is ready to switch to Russian solutions, as long as it doesn't significantly degrade their infrastructure, and how foreign vendors entered the Russian market and how these solutions are currently supported by Russian clients. When they left, they simply stopped working and updating overnight. And according to various rumors, if a client didn't disable updates from the internet, the device could even become bricked, meaning it would completely stop working. I must say, credit is due to the representatives of the Russian offices. Many clients warned about this problem through personal connections. And clients disabled automatic updates, so the hardware continued to work, but without updates. And without updates, such solutions aren't very relevant, because updates are probably one of the most valuable things they have, because, well, threats constantly arise, and one must always be up to date. So, accordingly, how is this working now? Currently, some companies, like buffer ones, are providing support services from countries that can still purchase these solutions. And many clients are using these services, simply extending them as they have no other options. And, accordingly, Checkpoint is still officially operating in Russia. The only nuance is that it does not work with sanctioned companies, which we have. There are already quite a few, so those who are under sanctions are facing difficulties, but they are also somehow solving their problems. That is, we don't delve too deeply into the legal side of the issue. The technical aspect is much more important to us. And the technical aspect is more about the fact that through updates, well, naturally, a not entirely genuine proper update might come, which is a real risk. Everyone understands this, but lacking alternatives, they continue to do so.
In the past year, we have heard about more than one and even more than two Russian NGFW solutions. Could you tell us why you decided to enter this market?
Well, the main difference between vendors and NGFWs is how well the underlying technology is made. Because, roughly speaking, there is a standard operating system, Linux, that the whole world uses, and it can essentially serve as a next-generation firewall if configured correctly, plus some open-source product that can be downloaded from the internet. And in such a configuration, many Russian companies are making many other security products, as we can see ourselves. That is, they take open source, create their own web interface, translate it into Russian, incorporate it into their stack, make some adjustments, and then start considering it their own because they seem to have understood the code. The Oxygen Generation Firewall has a technological problem. That is, if you do all this, it won't work because the basic tools within Linux and the available open source have objective limitations. We have a lot of different materials where we explain what those are. There is our show Behind the Glass, which has several videos on YouTube where we discuss this issue in detail. I gave a presentation at a high-profile event which won one of the prize places. That is, there we technically demonstrate why it is impossible to achieve this with basic tools. Well, accordingly, 100% of Russian solutions, well, I won't say 100% because there might be some that appeared yesterday that I don't know about, but those that are known generally use these very open tools, and they run into objective problems. One of the issues is performance. The second is fault tolerance, that is, if fault tolerance cannot be ensured at a technological level, then in fact, it will occasionally fail. Well, that is, it fails in such a way that there is no internet, it doesn't work, it's hard to set up, and so on. And all our clients, when we were doing the first KAZD and deciding whether to get into the topic or not, all highlighted the same thing, that there is a lack of stability, performance, and also ease of use, because usually in Russian production, things are quite brutal and not very user-friendly. With rare exceptions, we realized that we know how to solve these problems, because we have extensive experience. For example, we have a product called Publication Firewall, which protects all major resources in Russia from attacks. When the old one happened, there was a huge surge in these attacks on such resources. This product is essentially the only one in Russia that stands on such large resources, and we have vast experience in ensuring fault tolerance. The second story is about network attacks. We have a product called Attack Discovery, which, well, is another product that doesn't block attacks but searches for them in the traffic. So, we had two components from which we understood where we would draw experience and how we would create the product that we actually need specifically for firewalling. With that experience, we realized that this would take time, and, in fact, we organized this show Behind the Glass precisely so that clients would understand that it makes sense to wait. In other words, there's no point in buying what's currently available, as everyone has been criticizing Russian solutions. But we explained why they are like that and why ours will be different. We went into detail about how we will make it faster and why we can't deliver it tomorrow. In other words, it objectively takes quite a bit of time to develop because the foundation needed to be done well and globally, we have now reached a state where we, in terms of performance, some Western products have even surpassed ours. So, we're in a bit of a tricky situation, but when clients have hardware that has essentially become a brick and they can't use it, we try to install our software on it, and it works 4.5 times faster than the original. For us, that's a solid metric. We understand that we've managed to surpass them with our software. I even see why, because they were developing theirs back in 2012, while we started ours in 2022. If they had begun in 2025, they might have surpassed us too. So, whenever you tackle a task from scratch, you can do it better. But they are stuck with this legacy system. They have a lot of clients, and they can't approach this process as revolutionarily as we can. So, yes, at the moment, we have surpassed them. Perhaps one day they will do better, but the product we are developing is genuinely competitive not only in Russia but also worldwide. And our plans are certainly not limited to Russia. This is the international expansion we're talking about. Of course, we are currently moving forward with the products we already have, which are ready and so on, but as soon as the technology is widely tested in Russia, we will definitely take it to the international market as well. And at the same time, when we researched this issue worldwide, we also considered that there are these Western universes that have left Russia. Why would we suddenly be in demand? On one hand, we are technologically competitive. And on the other hand, it turns out that for many countries, it's very important to have independence. Technologically, if they buy hardware, for example, from America and cybersecurity from China, or vice versa. And when some of these countries have an allergy, they try to find a solution for cybersecurity in another location, but there's no more. And accordingly, when we present our Russian solutions, they look at it with interest and are ready to consider it. Therefore, I believe there are plenty of opportunities there, and we are placing a big bet on international business, not in 2024, but in 2025 and the following years.
Let's now talk about the prospects of the NGFW market in Russia. How much do you currently estimate this market to be worth in monetary terms, and what share is Positive Technologies ready and aiming to capture in the market?
In fact, this is probably the most contentious question in our so-called NGFW world, because all companies assess this market quite differently. There are different approaches to calculating it. One can assess the market size that Western competitors had before they left Russia. One can calculate a certain percentage of the international market or find other ways. But it is also important to consider the fact that since 2012, the entire infrastructure in the country has gradually been purchasing these next-generation firewalls, which now need to be replaced. So, on one hand, there is a cumulative total of what needs to be replaced at the moment, and on the other hand, there is simply the natural growth that has been occurring. But what is the logic behind it in principle? In any infrastructure, in any company, I don't know, even in very rare and small companies, it is absent. That is, usually it is present. It is either a physical hardware firewall, a virtual one, or purchased from a provider as a service. In other words, in one form or another, every company that is operational has some kind of exonation firewall. So, one can estimate, based on the number of clients, this is the number of legal entities or something close to it. At the same time, when we looked at market growth for 2022, we estimated new purchases to be around 30 billion, give or take, and for 2023, it was already up by 40% and so on. But everything that has been accumulated up to this point also showed us nearly 100. In total, we estimated that our market should be somewhere between 100 and 120 billion in 2024. This is, if the presidential decree that has been issued is enforced, which compels companies to switch to entirely Russian solutions, especially in the field of cybersecurity, by the 1st of January 2025. But it is obvious to us that even if companies start moving in this direction, replacing all the infrastructure they have built since 2012 will likely be quite difficult, in reality. Therefore, the market with accumulated deferred results is definitely over 100 billion. When this deferred result will be realized, we don't know, whether in 2025, 2024, or perhaps even some will extend to 2026, but the market itself is already probably around 50 and plus. There's this tail from it that we also plan to replace. Accordingly, our plans for this market are at 50%. In other words, we believe in ourselves. In fact, when we started developing it, we really wanted to partner with someone and thought we wouldn't have to do it ourselves. As I mentioned, for the sake of our entire ecosystem, it's important for us that such a product exists in principle. And while there were Western options, we were calm, everything was fine for us. But when we looked at what was available in the market, we realized that, well, actually, there's no one to partner with for now, and if we don't do it, probably nothing else will appear. So accordingly, our first commercial sales pilots indicate that we haven't made a mistake, that is, indeed, under high loads and in fault-tolerant systems, we perform well, unlike what we see at the moment. Therefore, well, what are our plans? 50% plus of the market, you see. We believe that companies will now start to replace and undertake these projects, but most likely their main wave will come in 2025 to 2026. That is, we see that when a large company wants to try our product, for example, it first tests it out, pilots it, and then makes a purchase in one of the segments. So, they're not ready to go all in straight away, they still want to try it out. What's important is that every project that comes to us is quite significant and large. So, there are no small projects, they're all very large, which is why we can't even roughly estimate the volume, because it might slightly exceed a year, and then it will drop into the following year. But next year looks very substantial for us, really large, and with the plan that the big project started now will be implemented then. So, to reiterate, there's a market of about 100 billion, likely closer to 150, and we plan to capture 50% of that market.
What are your sales plans for 2024, 2025, and the following years? What share could the Positive Technologies NGFW product occupy in your sales?
Well, we don't have competition between products within our portfolio. So, if I were to say we want to occupy a certain position relative to other products, it would be a bit incorrect towards them, but this year, our flagship product will probably remain the same as it was. So, it's unlikely that we can reach the top spot in sales from the first year. But I can personally say that next year we will be the best-selling product for Positive Technologies, simply because the addressable market is much larger than that of all the other products. It's worth mentioning that, surprisingly, in 70% of cases, firewalls are purchased by IT, not by information security, and we are essentially expanding our addressable market from purely IT to include IT. And many of the sales we are currently making and pursuing are with people we didn't even know before, because, essentially, all the other products are not for them, but this one is so. In this sense, Positive Technologies is somewhat expanding its addressable market almost twofold, as the entire cybersecurity market is estimated at over 200 billion, while the NGFW market alone is around 150 billion, which are comparable figures. So, in principle, it could become like all the other product portfolios.
You mentioned that clients are facing difficulties in quickly replacing hardware and software solutions. Could you tell us how long, on average, it takes for clients to transition to a search technology product with NGFW?
Well, we understand that this is the most common scenario for us when we replace another product, so we are naturally preparing for this case. We have special scripts that allow us to transfer the configuration from one product to another. To illustrate why this isn't so straightforward, let's take an American product as an example. What services might there be? There will be Tinder. But it shouldn't be there in Russia because it doesn't exist here. We should have 1C Bittrex, which definitely isn't there. So, it turns out that we can't just take and transfer the configuration of this product exactly, even if we really want to. So, it turns out that each time migrating from one product to another is essentially a project, because there is a starting point. On the other hand, we do everything that can be done automatically. So it really depends on how much life has developed around the product for the client. In other words, we have certain products around which a whole world has emerged. There are 2 companies that write the rules for the product, a bunch of people servicing it, around 30, and so on. And such migrations can take up to 6 months. The fastest migrations happen in just a few weeks. Well, there's quite a range. It depends on the scale of the project, the client, the readiness to move the infrastructure, the availability of technological windows, because, well, it's a live network. You can't just switch everything off and move the hardware. You have to do it at night or during some downtime. So, it ranges from a few weeks to half a year.
Could you please explain how the sale of the product in the technology train with NGFW to the client looks? Do you sell a single license or a set of licenses, a set of hardware?
Well, in reality, business in Russia is structured very specifically. When we started developing the product, we realized that we would have a limited number of clients who would buy 1 or 2 pieces of hardware. Simply due to the fact that everyone has a branch structure, many MNCs, we have a management system that has a hierarchical property. In other words, it works like a cluster of several boxes or virtual machines, but at the same time, it can manage a large distributed branch structure. And in each of the branches, there can either be security personnel and IT specialists managing things, or there might not be anyone at all, with everything being managed from the center. So it turns out that for each point where there is internet traffic and a cable comes in, you need to buy at least 2 pieces of hardware because it's a fault-tolerant cluster, specifically the firewalls. But there is also a management system that needs to be centralized. It can be distributed in clusters or whatever. So, you need licenses for the management system and, additionally, at least 2 pieces of hardware per traffic point, sometimes more if there's a lot of traffic from the firewalls. That's how it is, really. And, accordingly, if it's not hardware but virtual machines, then instead of hardware, you buy a license for the virtual machine and that's it. Yes, by the way, there was a funny story about how we went public. After all, we did a direct listing because we were under sanctions. And we had no idea how the trading would go, because for a very long time we were pushing marketing, investing in getting the opinion makers to tell individuals, doing all sorts of analytics. We tried everything. But on the day when we actually had the listing, we started the trading and had no idea what was going to happen. And we were wondering how it would go at all, whether someone would sell something, if the price would go up or down. It was all completely unclear. And we decided, if we're going down, let's do it with music. We'll make a celebration for ourselves. We ordered champagne, black caviar, then we thought about it, and ordered some vodka, and black bread. If it goes down, we'll have vodka with black bread, and if it goes up, then champagne. And we asked one of the well-known analysts, we won't name him, to comment on the candles for us like a football commentator. And we put it up on the big screen. The candles were going up and down, and he was commenting for us, look, they're buying back and forth. And since we were going out on the first day, we didn't know what bids to place, so we had to make calls. We've got loads of funny videos at Rocker of us calling, hey, did you place the bid or not? Back and forth, everyone was arguing, and those candles were rising. The commentator was commenting, well, in the end, our price did go up, or maybe we just ended up pouring the champagne. And since then, our shares have risen more than 3 times, so the positivity has been growing very actively and aggressively since then. I hope that you will invest in their firewall so that the next outcome will be even better.